Let's jump to this very important story about a harassment campaign.
Oh no!
By conservatives against a poor children's hospital in Boston. WBUR says Boston Children's Hospital deluged in harassment campaign. Heavens, what happened? Boston Children's Hospital has become the target of a harassment campaign based on inaccurate information about its transgender surgery program. Hospital staff say the campaign includes aggressive calls, emails, and death threats from some providers. It goes without saying, you shouldn't be sending death threats. Nobody should. However, I often find that when it comes to stories like this, concerned phone calls get called harassment.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So like if you call and you're like, I have some concerns about what you're doing, and they're like, oh, I'm being harassed. Quote, we are deeply concerned by these attacks on our clinicians and staff fueled by misinformation and a lack of understanding and respect for our transgender community, the hospital said in a statement. We are working with law enforcement to protect our clinicians, staff, patients, families, and the broader Boston children's community. So this all started when, who was it? Was it Billboard Chris?
Chris posted a video from Boston Children's Hospital.
And he also has evidence that
talking about hysterectomies.
Well, I mean,
just in general.
He also has evidence that they may be lying about the amount of threats that they have, because he posted a tweet.
He sure did.
He posted a tweet that I just pulled up here, and it says that he has a source within Boston Children's Hospital where he got all this stuff from, and he said that that most of the people there don't even know what is happening. Like he said
that's of course.
And so like
and also that there have not been ramped up security efforts at the hospital at all.
We got to slow down. We got to slow down to explain what happened. So this is a video comes up showing Boston's Children's Hospital it's a promotional video explaining hysterectomies and bilateral oophorectomy or oophorectomies.
They actually had several videos up on their site with very they're gone now with well-spoken doctors talking about how important and interesting these surgeries are, smiling, cute music in the background.
Gender affirming
is what they call it. Yeah, lady doctors. One doctor was talking about the process of a hysterectomy and saying that it's the same for young adults and for gender affirming treatment as it would be for anybody else, and talks about the full and complete removal of a woman's reproductive system.
No, the bilateral oophorectomy is differentiated.
Well, she talks about the whole thing.
Called?
She says that, she says that they remove the uterus, the fallopian tubes, and they could also remove the ovaries and the cervix. So that's everything. That's taking it all out at once. You have another doctor talking about how one way that you can tell your pre-verbal child is trans is if they play with toys that are stereotypically considered to be toys of the opposite sex.
Pre-verbal.
How do they know that? Like, how does the child know that society has deemed this particular toy of a human to be a male or female toy? Like a girl playing with a doll versus a boy playing with an action figure? They're just playing with people.
They also, that same doctor discusses in this very short little clip, a couple of minutes long, about how if your child doesn't want to get a haircut, maybe they are trans. If your child doesn't want to sit to pee or does want to sit to pee, then perhaps your pre-verbal child is trans. Any mom will tell you, I mean, my son still hates getting a haircut.
Yeah.
You know, he's for sure a boy. Like you guys have all met him. Like he's clearly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, so that's insane. You also have a doctor talking about phalloplasties and how a phalloplasty is done. And that same doctor, and that's one that Chris posted today, that same doctor, because actually we were all talking about this behind the scenes, and we saw them start to take this stuff down. And we were all, me and Christina Buttons, who writes for the Post Millennial, we were all like, record it, screen record.
What's happening now is you had Boston's Children's Hospital talking about the gender affirming programs they do. The media comes out all of a sudden saying it's not true, they're lies. You have to be at least 18. But they ignore the finer details. And so what ends up happening now is you have all of these outlets trying to claim they don't actually provide gender affirming surgeries. Interestingly, there's one particular trans person who quoted Vice. Vice ran the story saying the far right's targeting the hospital, saying that the hospital says you have to be at least 18. And this trans person says that's not true.
Yes.
Came out and said no. It is common to give 16-year-olds gender-affirming surgery, and then they mentioned that they got it and that they need to normalize it or whatever because that's how you get. I mean,
I can break this down for you a little bit too. I was working on this story last week with Christina Buttons, who wrote it and did an amazing deep dive into that for Post Millennial, and if you look at their documentation prior to when they changed it on the site, their forms for how to go about getting approved for vaginoplasties, chest reconstruction, and what's the other one? Phalloplasties, right? They have it all written down. So it says on their forms, to get a phalloplasty, you need to be between 18 and 35. To get a vaginoplasty, you need to be between, and you could look at it. It's in our story. We have the screenshots. It's to get a vaginoplasty, you need to be 17, between 17 and 35.
That would be the removal of male sexual reproductive organs.
Right, and the
removal.
reshaping of it into something that appears like that of the opposite
So a
sex.
17-year-old being totally sterilized.
Yes, and it also says that 15-year-olds, you have to be 15 in order to get a chest reconstruction or a double mastectomy of healthy breasts. And what's particularly interesting is that they changed the language afterwards. The videos say exactly what they do. They also follow these guidelines from WPATH, that say, and they say that they follow these guidelines, as do most gendery, clinic-y places. They follow these guidelines that also say that parents, if parents approve these procedures, they can be done at younger ages. The doctor who talks about the phalloplasty or the vaginoplasty says that in some cases it can be done younger as well. So yeah, they're making this up.
So I have here from NIH.gov. This is a report. A single center case series of gender affirming surgeries and the evolution of specialty anesthesia team. This is the Journal of Clinical Medicine, MDPI, blah, blah, blah. In there, on the second page, it says, in Materials and Methods, Boston Children's Hospital is a pediatric academic hospital in the United States providing gender-affirming surgery to patients aged 15 years to 35 years of age.
There it is.
And they say including gender-affirming primary and multi-specialty care involving inpatient and outpatient care. And they go on to mention a bunch of other things. But yeah, 15-year-olds
right.
getting sex change surgeries.
But they also say, additionally, and on the Boston Children's Hospital website, they have these glowing profiles. They're promo profiles, right, of teens who have gone through their program. One of the teens, their whole family moved from Texas in order to access these services, and is on puberty blockers and estrogen, and frequently has to go into the hospital to get bone scans and things like that, because these are remarkably dangerous drugs to take. Additionally, that child's parent is talking to the hospital about how to make sure to harvest the reproductive material for this child, who will be fully sterilized if they go through this procedure, so that they can have like their sperm when they are grown up. They have that person is 13. They also have a 7th grader who is on puberty blockers and is really excited about being non-binary.
I want to point out here from The Conversation, the Tavistock Clinic was shut down in the UK after a review found that they were actually causing serious harm to children. One of the cases was a young female who was on puberty blockers and developed advanced osteoporosis, where her bones became extremely brittle and were cracking. And that's the danger of these drugs, and the reason I say that is because the NHS shut down the program. Now we can look at these other European countries that are held up as like the pinnacle of healthcare by the left. They talk about
they're not
Scandinavia.
doing it.
They're ending it all. They're saying it's bad. It's hurting kids. Now the UK is saying, yeah, we can't do this.
Well,
it's
but
about
in the
time
US,
the United States starts paying attention to what these other countries are talking about.
Right, but we have people who are making far too much money off of this. If you look at some of the reporting that Jennifer Bilek has done, right? She's done these deep dives into
I love capitalism.
She's done these deep dives into the pharmaceutical industry and found that the amount of money being generated from giving these off-label drugs to kids, performing these surgeries, it's huge. And now you have the Biden administration pressing for insurance companies to cover this, or else those insurance companies are considered discriminatory. However, why is it that it is discriminatory for insurance companies to not cover breast augmentation for men, but it's not discriminatory for insurance companies to not cover breast augmentation for women? In fact, if you look at the Supreme Court ruling on Bostock, which said that, what's her name, Amy Schneider, the man who was trans and was going to the funeral home dressed in women's clothing, right? So the Supreme Court said you can't fire Amy, because Amy, if you fire Amy for wearing women's clothing, you are discriminating against Amy on the basis that Amy is a man, because a woman would not be fired for wearing women's clothing.
This was Supreme Court, right?
This was the Supreme Court.
What basically codified gender identity as protected under 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Exactly. So that's what Bostock did. Now, if you are requiring insurance companies to give boob jobs to men on the basis that it's discriminatory against their gender identity to not fund it.
That's what they're doing?
This is what the Biden administration has instructed Medicaid to do under HHS.
Huh.
Yes. I wrote about this for Human Events. Yeah. So what's interesting is it not discriminatory to tell a woman that she cannot affirm her female gender identity?
Free boob jobs?
Free boob jobs for men, though. Not for women.
Not for women.
But I think that's discriminatory because you're discriminating against a woman's gender identity by not letting her get boob jobs for free.
Well, you can put it simply, you can't provide to one sex something and not to the other.
So I think Medicaid really needs to step it up and start providing boob jobs for women for free.
Yeah.
Additionally,
I think most guys in this country would agree.
What? Yeah. Sex work is work, y'all, right? So don't you think that underprivileged women should have the opportunity to further their careers in sex work by getting free boob jobs under Medicaid?
You don't need boobs to be good at sex. Let's just get that on the table.
I'm just in awe of the fact that
I'm just saying. I'm in awe. Don't you think?
I'm in awe of the fact that we're even like having this conversation. Like, what the hell are we doing?
I have this conversation literally every day.
Ever since the Large Hadron Collider fired up in 2016, our universe has been imploding.
Why are we even talking about men getting boob jobs? Like,
because they want them.
This is like
because they don't want to be men. And maybe they just want to stay home and play with them.
You're speaking my mind, Greg. Like, I'm like, why? This is a hard one to go through, but I think people need to hear it. They need to learn.
Well, look. We'll keep it to the basics of the law, and I think the challenge with the law is you can't have moral logic in the law. Otherwise, you will get things you don't want. So I mentioned this a couple times, but I'll break it down this way. The left says we want gender identity to be protected. The law then says, okay, that has to be defined in such a way that anyone can understand it. So in New York, they say gender identity is self-expression. But self-expression is so broad, it now starts to encompass literally anything. And now they actually say that any gender that you come up with or clothes you wear. So what ends up happening is when you say we shouldn't allow the government to, pay for plastic surgery or whatever, you get the question of, well, what about this person needs gender affirming care to save their life? Okay, we'll allow that. Okay, well, but what about a woman who also is depressed for having small breasts? She needs it for the exact same reason. She's depressed, she's having suicidal ideation, and believes, talk to her therapist, that breast implants would alleviate the depression, body dysmorphia. Then based on the moral logic, we have to provide it to everybody, right? Well, now I don't think, actually I should say, I think the left probably would be on board with that. But this is where it gets difficult for, where we are. If you would argue that in Florida, parents have the final say in what medical treatments their kids get and what their kids learn, that includes a parent choosing to give their kid a sex change operation. So if you don't want the government mandating vaccines, then I think it's just you have to come out and say it's not about moral logic and consistency in the law. It's about upholding your values. And your values will say the government should stop one thing, but should not stop the other based on your personal beliefs.
So do you think parents should be allowed to amputate their children's legs?
Well, I'm not saying one way or the other. What I'm saying is,
should that be legal?
But this is my point.
Right.
Hell no, unless there's a threat to the kid's life. Hell no.
So why should they be allowed to amputate their
I think the answer is clearly yes.
Dicks. Don't you think it's child abuse?
Should a parent be allowed to bring their kid to the doctor, get their legs amputated? Yes, absolutely.
Healthy legs?
Well, you didn't say healthy.
I'm saying healthy. That's the caveat.
Right. So here's the issue. If a kid has got MRSA or gangrene or something, or a serious catastrophic injury, and the doctor says, I believe the leg should be amputated. How does the government, if they're seeking to intervene to prevent healthy amputations, determine fast enough in this circumstance? This is the challenge of hard moral logic in the law. We have to recognize it's about values and not about saying government should or shouldn't. So if a parent goes to the doctor and the doctor says, if we don't cut this leg off, the kid's going to get a blood infection and die. And then the government goes, that leg looks fine to me. You're amputating your kid's healthy leg.
Well, now we go back to the Christian Scientists, who refused medical treatment across the board, and I think ended up getting sued for that, right? Didn't the Supreme Court make a decision on Christian Scientists who don't want to bring medical treatment for their kids?
Well, it's a big challenge.
This was when I was a kid, they were talking about this.
But I think there's like a distinction to be made about, if you're losing the leg example of a parent saying that they just want to amputate their kid's leg for shits and gigs.
But no one is saying that. When it comes to gender affirmation, the parents are saying, I'm concerned my kid will kill themselves because they've become depressed and they're having suicidal ideation.
Okay, but
now a lot of these institutions are just speeding these kids through, as we learned from Helena Kirshner and many other detransitioners. They walk in and there's like an hour consultation before they're given powerful drugs. So the issue is, when it comes to should parents have final say, you run into a challenge of saying, I stick to the strict reality of the law. No, you don't. You would say, no, you can't amputate the genitals of this child. That's wrong. Government should stop you. However, in other circumstances, you want the parents to have total discretion.
My view is parents can have discretion, but I would like to ban them from surgically mutilating the bodies of their children. I don't think I can be a hypocrite for saying that. I want government to come in and say, you are not allowed to do this. This is evil. This is hurting children.
You're also not allowed to beat your children.
Yeah, like
this is my point.
And there have been no long-term studies about what the effects of these drugs do to kids over time. Like, there have been no long-term studies into this.
This is the point I'm making. You cannot make the argument that parents should have final say if you believe there are circumstances where they should not. So we went through this with the Parental Rights and Education Bill, where everyone said parents have a right to determine what their kids are learning. And I say, I agree with that. And there are circumstances. We had someone on recently. We were talking about if parents don't want to give their kid, cancer treatment, should the government intervene, take their kids away? And they said, yes, the government absolutely should. And I'm like, no way. I completely oppose that.
Bethany Mandel.
Well, that's Christian. I watched that episode. That's the.
I don't think the government knows everything. And I think there's very difficult questions in what's right for your children. And the last thing I want is for the government to come in and say, we're injecting your child against your will with something. Not every parent is a doctor. Not every, most parents are not doctors, considering. And so there's a real challenge of when you let the government come in and decide what medical treatments you have to get.
Yeah, there is the get taller surgery. Get taller surgery.
But they already do that. Like, they do that with there are vaccines that you have to get in order to send a child to public school. Like, they're doing that.
But there are exemptions to those, I'm pretty sure. And there are tough questions about the government coming and saying, because you did not do this, we're taking your children away. And, well, you don't have to do it, but you can't come to our place if you didn't.
Well,
right? That's very different.
There's a polio outbreak in New York right now because people didn't get their kids vaccinated.
Is that why, though?
Yes.
I mean, this is New York.
I heard it was
New York. Vaccine. New York is full of anti-vaxxers.
Well, no, it's happening mostly. I think isn't it happening?
Democrats.
Isn't it happening mostly in the Orthodox Jewish community?
Yeah, it's happening mostly in Rockland County in the
because Orthodox
community.
Jews don't believe in any of that.
Well, because I called my kid's doctor. I was like, "So polio? What's the deal? What are we doing now?" And he was like, "It's unvaccinated is what it is." And I was like, "Oh."
It's still, I'm gonna with a grain of salt. I don't know why people are getting polio. Sometimes diseases come out, they tell you it's for one reason, turns out it's for another reason.
Oh, yeah. Interesting, yeah.
But I just think, just when it comes to mutilation of a healthy child's bodies who have gender dysphoria and need help that doesn't involve going through a sex change operation when you're 13 or 14 years old, I don't see why you can take the position of parents' rights while also saying this should be illegal because this is wrong and it's hurting people and it's causing irreversible damage to children every day. I think if you do that to your children, you are abusing your children, and child abuse is what we consider to be legal or illegal.
I went to an antique store and they had 340 Life magazines from 1940 to 1970. Amazing. I bought them all. And we're going to put together a reading area so we could basically, what I want to do is I want to sort them. That's the word. Sort them all by date. And then do a kind of breakdown of stories at the time, how they were reported versus what we know now. Because we have Vietnam and stuff. But I bring this up because Thalidomide is one of the magazines that I have.
Oh, when it was great?
Thalidomide, so great. Mother's anti-nausea medicine. You're pregnant, take this. And then the kids had no arms.
Right. Or they were all weird.
Yeah.
They're weird fish arms.
Yeah, they had just like hands on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And it was like, was it for morning sickness or whatever?
It was for morning sickness, yeah.
Now, what I don't want, here's the challenge. When a new treatment comes out, does a person have a right to try it? Like if a drug comes out and says this will treat your morning sickness, one have a right to take it.
Well, yeah, Trump signed right to try into law. And
No, but that's when you're dying. I'm talking about an anti-nausea medicine comes out, women will take it, and then all of a sudden a few years later we're like, whoopsie. Like,
don't you think that there should be an approvals process?
But there is. Remember that, what was that birth control that got recalled? I don't know the name, but whatever.
Orthotricycline, they all get recalled at some point.
There was some commercial that was really popular, and like a year later they were like
Gardasil?
I don't know.
Gardasil is the HPV vaccine.
Yeah, they recalled it or whatever. The issue is, if there's something being sold and there's some treatment, right? So like, Joe Rogan talks about like NAD and stuff. And Luke was on the show talking about stem cell therapy, where they give you an IV and flood your body with stem cells to repair damage. And it's like, what's the long-term effects of that? Because we've not been doing that for a long time. Should people have a right to try that if they want? They say it's safe. They say it can be used to treat cancer. My point is, you could get a treatment and then it turns out it's really, really bad. Like thalidomide. These women were like, hey, this medicine's going to make me not feel sick. And then their kids had no arms. Like, totally crazy stuff. And then once they found out, they were like, we got to stop doing that. So, ultimately what it comes down to is, I don't think the government should mandate. And then there are questions about what the limits we set are when the government can mandate. It's not as simple as to say the government can or can't. It's as simple to say we have values and we've determined in some areas we won't allow it, in some areas we will.
I just take the position that child abuse is illegal. Like, I consider this child abuse if you are doing this to your kid who has gender dysphoria. Because why do a lot of parents put their children through this? Is it because they really care about them, or are they just like really woke and want to be cool in front of their friends?
I think it varies.
I think it varies a lot too. But it is still child abuse to do this, and child abuse is illegal. Like, we don't allow parents to abuse their children because that's parents' rights. Like, that would be illegal. They would be arrested for that.
A good friend of mine, her daughter is going through this now. And she was convinced to push her daughter into this direction because the psychologist said that her daughter was going to kill herself.
Okay, but we're seeing that suicide rates are up a lot with people who do go through this as well.
This was about 6 years ago. So that's where they are. They're dealing with this now.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.